full-time employee and they just want to start doing content creation or podcasting or YouTubing. They do it for just self-awareness, personal branding, like just getting your name out there. There's so many benefits. Like you said, it could just be as simple as finding a recruiter or finding someone that's hiring for a role that could be your next thing. Like when I started posting, I had no goal or outcome in mind other than I knew one day I would want to build my own product, and I realized I didn't want to wait until then to start posting, because I knew by then that I would need a couple more years to finally get to a meaningful place. So I live in northern Utah in the US. I have been doing design work for about 12 years and recently entered the self-employed world about a year ago, doing the freelance game full-time for about a year now. Yeah, also working on building a tool for LinkedIn content creators called Kleo. That's pretty much my main focus right now, client work and Kleo. That's been all I work on for the past year or so. I also create content on LinkedIn. That's a little bit about me.
Yeah, and very modest, because if any designers listening to the show, you've probably seen Trevor on LinkedIn. And then Kleo, I see people in like Great Britain talk about Kleo as like a recommended social media tool. So like really awesome career so far. I want to start the conversation here today. Let's not bury the lead. I want to talk about LinkedIn, personal branding, how you can build a self-sustaining solopreneur type business, and your journey there, because the day of this recording, you posted 1 year later, here's 9 wins post layoff, reflect on 12 months of self-employment. You have 10 clients. You've recouped 96% of the income that you lost from the layoff. Is that what you meant by that?
I was adding up the income I've earned in the past year, and it's 96% of the last salary I had, comparing gross to gross.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were able to replace the income
Almost entirely, yeah.
Yeah, with a diversified list of clients, and you could keep going up, right, with it. And then 20 features design, got Kleo's now at 26,000 users, 4 design systems, 9-month retainer, 3 websites created, brands designed, 2 UX audits. It's such a testament to the power of the internet for you to be in control of your destiny. Can you walk me through the process from your layoff to this moment where you were able to like look back and see like the numbers you put up? Tell me about like, the biggest epiphanies you learned about yourself, or the false beliefs you had done this process, and like walk us through that journey of like how you became self-sustaining, like replacing like your normal in-house income with an actual business.
Yeah, that's a fun question. There's so many things. Walking through the process, it was quite the mental adjustment to go away from 9 to 5. In my head, when I got laid off, my immediate reaction was to find another job. I immediately posted in a couple of Slack communities, and then posted on LinkedIn like, hey, I'm looking for leads for jobs. That was my focus. But I got a couple of leads for client work instead of actual full-time jobs. So then I started doing that because I was really grateful that I had the income coming in, so I didn't have to go straight to zero income. Because I did have one very part-time client at that time that I had just started with a month before I got laid off, and they were kind to increase my hours after they found out I got laid off. That helped me stay afloat and not go straight to zero income. I got a couple more leads as I started to broadcast that I was on the search for a full-time job. But then I started to realize there's a lot of people that want to hire part-time designers, even on a monthly recurring basis. So the biggest epiphany for me was that I had grown to sort of detest client work over the years. Like I probably said that to a lot of people, like I hate client work. But really what I hated was the stress it caused, because client work had always been in addition to full-time work. Client work was always this extra burden on top of working, 40 hours a week, sometimes more or less. So to do client work was always such a burden. But then I realized, if that's your main gig is client work, and you can find partnerships that are recurring on a month-to-month basis to make it more stable and long-term, suddenly like it became possible for me to do this full time with just 2 part-time monthly recurring clients. That equals full-time work. You can be creative with the pricing model and how you arrange this with different clients, but I've learned that, like, 2, maybe 3, it can replace a full-time salary and beyond with these customers. And then the benefit to them is that they don't have to pay a full-time designer. They may not need that. They may not be able to afford a full-time designer. They may not want to cover the benefits and insurance. It's been a win-win for me and for the clients I've worked with. To your question of what was the epiphany, what it took for me to realize that it was possible was figuring out how to almost create your own full-time job by piecing together different part-time roles.
Couple thoughts listening to that. The CEO of Impeccable started out just like you, 10-year-old design agency. He was a guest on this podcast. And when I was telling him about eventually, I want to take like a career break where I just do like client work. And he's like, yeah, you only really need like 1 or 2. And then eventually, once you get the system down, you can start building a team and bringing in juniors to help with increasing the revenue and stuff like that. And then the second one, which was an insight I got from reading a fiction series called Red Rising, which is a fantastic sci-fi epic. When I found out the author was like 35, like Pierce Brown, and he's already written like 6 like books. He's a full-time author, and he was a tech worker who just wrote that first novel, Red Rising, and then now it became his job. I was like talking about it with like a coworker of like, man, like what am I doing with my life? Like, I'll be 35 in a few years. And he said, if that's the one thing you did, it would be easy. If you're writing a book, how's that any different than what you're doing right now? You're inventing financial tech for produce. How's that any different than writing a book? When you hear these authors talking about their journey, like they're serial authors or serial entrepreneurs or freelance designers, it's always the first book's always the hardest because you're doing it on the side. But then if that's successful and it bankrolls future work, they're pumping out a book every year because it's their job now. And so I thought that was a really interesting insight about like freelance work. Like, no, it sucks as a side hustle, but anything sucks as a side hustle.
Exactly. Like so many people start their startup as a side hustle, then they get funding and go full time, or they are really patient and bootstrap it for a long time. Everything requires some sort of sacrifice to get started. Sometimes that's doing it on the side when it's really uncomfortable, or the sacrifice is not having income so you can dedicate your full-time attention to it. No matter how you slice it, if you want to become full-time on something that you own, there's this sacrifice that has to happen in some way, And for me, I didn't really choose it. I kind of got forced into this. And I honestly can't say that freelance work is the end game forever. I would love for Kleo, for example, to blow up, and that could potentially become my full-time gig down the road.
Yeah.
But even then, it's almost like that's my side hustle now, in a way.
Like an actual company is your side hustle. You flipped it.
Kind of funny.
Tell me a little bit about like how you came into. Well, actually, I'm gonna try to go back in time, right? You've like maybe in the last couple of years fully started like doubling down on LinkedIn. Can you tell me about when that layoff happened and the growth numbers of when you decided to start doing properly? How did that lead to your role at Kleo?
No, I got it.
Answering it.
I got it. So
all right.
I took LinkedIn seriously at the beginning of 2022. It was right when I started my last full-time role. So I don't know what it was about that role. It was a crypto startup, also here in Utah. And when I started there, for some reason, I had always wanted to write online. Years ago, I wanted to start a blog, but I didn't, because I was like, I just don't want to be like another blog, the same reason most people probably don't post online right now. They're like, I don't want to be just another add noise. People say that sometimes. I don't want to just add more noise to people's feed. I've had the desire to write online for many years, but sometimes when you get a new job, it shakes things up and you have this rejuvenated mindset. And so anyway, I started at that crypto startup. And at that same time, I started posting almost every day on LinkedIn. For the first 6 months or so, I was like, I think I did 3 times a week. And then I doubled that and started doing almost every day. So for a while, for like another 6 months or even longer, I was doing maybe 6 posts a week. It was tough to maintain, but I feel like that's when, like, I feel like it started to really take off. Even when it went pretty well, even posting 3 times a week. I'd recommend that to anyone starting out. You don't have to post every day. It seemed like it really took off when I started doing almost daily. Like, there's just so much compounding. Like, there's so much compounding effects when you're putting your ideas and your name, your profile picture appearing in people's feeds every day. Like, for some people, they're afraid of that. They may think it gets annoying. People will unfollow you if they are not interested, and that's totally fine. I feel like I've gone through waves of, like, if I look back at posts a year ago, there's people commenting on my posts that don't comment anymore. Maybe they've moved on. Maybe they don't even open up LinkedIn anymore. But yeah, I feel like I went through these. I just tried to be consistent for a long time. Thankfully, at that last full-time job, I started taking LinkedIn seriously, because then it truly became beneficial when I was able to then utilize LinkedIn to announce, hey, I'd been laid off, and got a lot of support from sharing that with people. Even a year later, I still post about my layoff. People resonate with reading about layoffs because so many people have been laid off.
Yeah.
So many people are afraid of getting laid off. So I feel like that's always a good, like, those posts always get a lot of engagement and generate a lot of discussion, because layoffs are a big topic and people get really emotionally engaged. And I enjoy writing about it because it's been a journey. It's been a story. Writing about it has been therapeutic in a way. It's been awesome getting support from people and sharing how I've managed this adjustment in my career, building a public in a way.
Do you feel like that's when your follower numbers started going up, when you started sharing your story instead of just talking about generic design stuff?
Good question. I feel like in the past year, my content output has gone down just because client work and Kleo has been so busy. It's been a lot harder to justify writing posts.
Because you don't just write a post, you make a visual to accompany the post.
Yeah, that's definitely slowed down my process a bit. I always like to include a visual because I'm a designer. I like to be able to look at my past posts as thumbnails to quickly remember what that one was by the visual, instead of having to read the words. It gives you extra surface area in someone's feed to brand yourself. You can use a font, a color, even the dimensions. Like, some people use different dimensions. Like Emily Mazaresk, for example, I think she does a square post. In my mind, I recognize that. I recognize the dark background. She uses white text, and then she uses some colors. You identify someone by the visuals. So yeah, using an image has definitely been helpful, and I think a lot of people have sort of developed that if they're a designer and they post with an image.
Yeah. So it's been hard to do something like that because it takes a little bit of extra effort, definitely like an ROI, when you provide like that branded image. Your content's gone down. Are you saying that ironically
I would
have been
say
going up?
I would just say the amount of content I create and produce and publish has gone down, because I'm definitely not posting 6 days a week anymore. That's not really possible right now. But talking to other content creators, they'll say the same thing, that it's okay for your content to be seasonal. Some people are extremely diligent,
consistent.
like Soren Iverson. He just posted this week that he did 600 days in a row without missing a single UI concept. That's insane. Like, 600 days, and all of them are great. He never posts anything that's subpar. He would probably think that many of them were subpar, but they all get so much.
They're all funny.
Yeah, they're all.
That's a good follow, by the way. Like Soren Iverson.
For sure. He's good. And he's another one that's consistent. He uses the same background color on every single post, the same little phone frame on every post. Mm-hmm. So when you see it, you know it's another Soren post. For me, the last year, it's been less output. But when I do post, I feel like I put a lot of effort into it. I still get pretty good engagement on posts. I feel like I'm not in a season of announcing or broadcasting something. I'm more in build mode, trying to help for my clients, but also for Kleo. Once we get this next version of Kleo out, I'm sure I'm going to be a lot more anxious to promote it.
Yeah.
And talk about it and share the process. But right now, it just doesn't make as much sense to talk about it. It's just not ready. People can't go install that version.
You don't want to pre-hype it.
I'd rather let the actions speak louder than words. I've fallen for that in the past, where I get excited about something. I go tell the world about it. In a way that can be good, because it try to hold yourself accountable, but in this case, it's like, no, let's just build it, launch it, and then we'll talk about it.
I did a season in a year. maybe 12
Okay.
episodes. Maybe I did 2 seasons. Like I'll do something in the fall or the spring. Still 12 episodes. Like wasn't weekly, wasn't consistent. Whenever I had a new episode, I just said, "Hey, I got a new episode." Around year 4, it was just the compound effects. I know personally that seasonality is actually pretty good because people are like, oh, I haven't seen this person in a while. And then when you see them again,
Mhm.
it's kind of like, oh, cool. I wonder what they've been up to. It's like gives people a chance to kind of do something else and then come back to you because around year 4, most of my guests are brought to me by PR agents. I don't
Oh,
have to
wow.
hustle. And I think the consistency, like Seth Godin, he won't do an episode on a podcast unless that podcast has at least 100 episodes. He wants to interview someone that isn't just trying to use podcasting for marketing and has like 5 episodes and are trying to be the next Joe Rogan. So that's a filter for him when he accepts invites.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've never noticed anything wrong with that. What got me thinking about this was a PR agency reaching out to me saying, "Hey, do you want to be a guest on Forbes?" And this is a perfect sign that like anyone that's a contributor on Forbes, it's just a racket. You could pay. It cost about $5,000 to get on Wall Street Journal. To put that brand next to your name, like, oh, I contributed to Wall Street Journal, and I just asked him, I'm like, and drive what revenue, right? Like, I don't have any products, I don't have any services. Why would I do this? Oh, well, it'd be good for your career. It's a status game. It helps if like maybe you're a startup founder, you actually want to drive attention to your startup for investors, I guess, or whatever. But I think investors know the PR game too, so like they could probably see it through it.
So did you do
And
it? Did you do the Forbes thing?
I don't have any revenue. If I want to get attention, I want to make money off of it. I want to make my money back. And that really got me thinking. I'm just like, because before that, I'm like, oh, I want to get to weekly episodes. I want to be like posting like what crazy well edited videos. But
Mm.
for what? Right? Mostly everything is like a branding exercise. I'm not doing direct response marketing where I'm like, trying to hyper target people to like get a conversion like right away. I'm not trying to be famous. I'm not trying to be well known. I'm trying to be known well. People are just like, oh man, how many downloads are you getting per episode? I'm like, about 300 to 500 per episode. And they're like, oh, that's not a lot. I only need one person to listen to it, to be my next boss or next client. I only need the right 5 people to listen to it, and I'll be gravy. I'm not selling an information product or anything like that. It's just what I've noticed, right? Eventually you get so busy that it like the marketing, consistent marketing is actually a detriment to the business seasonally. And so like I totally get it that it's like if I'm busy, I'm just not going to post as much or I automate a lot of it. I'm not trying to be viral, consistent over years.
I totally get it. Like when I started my last full-time role and I started posting, I didn't have anything that I was selling other than like myself. I would
Yeah.
myself as an employee was like the only product I had. So
Yeah.
in a way that's like one motive that somebody might have if they're a full-time employee and they want to start content creation, podcasting or YouTubing, they do it for just self-awareness, personal branding, like just getting your name out there because
Mm-hmm.
it helps. There's so many benefits. It could just be as simple as finding a recruiter or someone that's hiring for a role that could be your next thing. When I started posting, I had no goal or outcome in mind other than I knew one day I would want to build my own product, and I realized I didn't want to wait
Yeah.
until then to start posting because I knew by then that I would need a couple more years to get to a meaningful place.
Yeah.
So you start early and just know someday this is going to be beneficial because it's like planting a tree. You're not going to get the shade from that tree for several years. So you got to plant it early. So I think there's just so many benefits, and you may not even know what the benefit is today, but it's worth doing something to get your name in front of people's eyeballs so they know what your expertise is. They're engaged in your story, especially with layoff season these past couple of years. There's
Mm-hmm.
never been more motive to post regularly. You might get laid off, and posting online could help you find your next role. It's as simple as that.
In your research improving Kleo, is there any insights as to why people are reluctant to start creating content and have that perspective that you just defined? People are like, wow, you have this long-term perspective. And I'm like, well, I didn't get it until after doing it for like 5 or 6 years and seeing the benefits of it. For the first 4 years, I'm like, why am I doing this? This sucks. I got to edit another episode. I got to find another guest. I need 12 episodes. I need to book 12 guests. And I did not see the benefit. It's easy for me to say, oh, just have a long-term thinking, because now I'm past the hard part, like the dip, and I'm getting the benefits from 4 years of work. Is there anything that you found working on Kleo that is why people don't want to do it?
Why people don't want to post?
Or like they're reluctant to post? What are the biggest blockers?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is people don't know what to post about. And then I think one way that Clio does help with that is when you install it, there's a free version, it's a Chrome extension. It just shows popular posts. So you can
Yeah.
quickly get ideas. In the next version we're working on, you can create creator lists. So you could
Follow
see just the posts of people you want to see. You can kind of get rid of all the other noise on LinkedIn.
a curated feed.
Yeah, curated feeds. Yep, exactly. That's a word we've used. So, or a phrase we've used. So, yeah, I think half of the battle with content creation is just not feeling inspired. So getting started is hard because it's like staring at a blank canvas. As a designer, opening up a blank canvas is really hard. But if you join a team that has existing content or a component library, you can pull from that. There's existing flows and screens you can copy paste and then just make adjustments. It's so much easier to build off of something that exists. With content, if you can start with something, even if it's a template, like we just launched this thing called the LinkedIn Creator, and it's almost like a personality adjacent to Clio that promotes Clio on the daily basis. We post every day. We have a weekly newsletter, and we give away templates and creator stories, just trying to help inspire people. People are just like, I want to post. I want the benefits of having followers or having a personal brand, but it's just so hard to get started. So I think that's one way to just easily get going is to stop staring at a blank screen, start with a template, look at what somebody else has posted, copy paste it into your text document, and somebody else has posted, copy paste it into your, like, don't copy it. And I think some people fall into like copying too much, but just let it be a starting, adjust it to be yours.
Yeah.
It's the same in content creation. Like you see someone else do an idea, they shared a list of tools they use. You're like, oh, I'm going to share a list of tools I use. That's an easy content idea, and people love talking about tools. So, yeah, that's part of the challenges for people trying to figure out what to write about, and you got to find ways to make it easier for yourself to make it more sustainable.
In the book, The Laws of Creativity, which I did an interview with the author, Joey Cafone, and he talks. It's basically, I think most people are familiar with like the law, like 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Robert Greene writes a lot of books about just high level, like first principles about human nature. And Joey Cafone basically made the 48 Laws of Power, but for creativity. And one of the laws in there, I think it's the law of inspiration or connection, right? Is that creativity isn't making like a net new thing. It's it's seeing the unseen connections between things that already exist and seeing like, hey, there's a better way to implement this, right? Because like what is like most software companies, most SaaS, they all use AWS, they all use React as the framework. They're probably using the same front end libraries to make their design systems. It's all about connecting the right implementation of a technology. It's not about inventing a new thing. There's another like Steve. He quotes Steve Jobs that if you ask anybody here at Apple, they feel guilty when people say, "Wow, you're so creative, you're a genius." They feel bad because they're like, "No, I just saw these things that were obviously a good idea, and I did the hard work to figure out how to make it a good idea, like a reality." And so your imagination is limited by your source material, basically, is the takeaway there. And so if you're not consuming, and by the way, I'm a subscriber to the LinkedIn Creator. I save like every email to a collection because I'm like, I don't have time to read this right now, but I make a folder in my email, I send them there, and every now and then I'll go through all of them, find something I like, and pull a template, because great creativity requires taste. And how do you have taste if you're not trying everything?
So true. The part where you were talking about connecting ideas, like when you mentioned SaaS and these startup founders creating tools that are similar to other tools using the same technology but slightly different. I think a
Yeah.
lot of that depends on the actual customer. There might be a customer base out there, and it may not be huge, but it's enough that it could make you very wealthy by serving this specific niche in the market. And you create a tool that has just the right pieces put together. Those pieces all exist somewhere else, but a lot of the tools will just like they tout that you can get rid of 5 other tools by using this one tool. So it's like, can you find ways to connect things that are useful for this one type of customer? And that's how a lot of software companies and founders become very wealthy, because they found that niche and built for that specific group of people, and then they can build up from there once they have a stronger brand reputation and can serve
Mm-hmm.
more people. And so I think content's similar. Like you may think everyone's posting about everything. Why would I talk about this? Everyone's already written about that. The people that you write to will have just the right touch on it that your content will be different from everyone else. And you'll write for a specific reader or audience that nobody else is writing for. And you don't have to be viral or famous to make it worthwhile. So I think that's the same with startups. I think we all have the Facebook, Airbnb, DoorDash stories of these startups that blow up, and some people set that as their standard. It's this really high bar to reach. It's like, why would I even try? I'm never going to be like that. Nowadays, I love things that Justin Welsh talks about, creating a lifestyle business. You create your just enough revenue to make your life happy and to create freedom from your 9 to 5. Content creation can be the same. You don't need millions, or even like you don't even need 100,000 followers or even tens of thousands. If you just have the right people that are highly engaged with your material, you can do a lot with that. I'm sure you've experienced that too, where you don't have to go
Yeah.
viral with every podcast episode for it to be worthwhile.
It's like, and the benefit of a podcast too is that you own the library, and you get residual listens on all the episodes. So like if someone discovers you, they'll just like binge if they feel like
Ah,
they'll listen to your old stuff and work their way back. And so the first episode I ever recorded has like a ton of downloads because it's usually the first one that shows up. Unfortunately, I had to like go back and remaster the audio because it was so bad. Thank you, AI, to like fix the audio quality. But I'm like, this is people's first impressions. Shoot, okay, well, I'm gonna make it sound better, because when people discover you, they're gonna scroll through your catalog, look for headlines that seem interesting, and they'll listen. And they might discover you through like a TikTok post or something like that. But it's always been a long game for me. I'm always jealous of you, or man, I forgot his name. There's this other creator that you guys just make the photos and get all these likes. And I'm like, am I doing the wrong strategy here? But then I realized, okay, the likes are great, and I love it when I get a lot of likes and engagement, because that like gives you more exposure, and like that's really like what they're for, right? Is the more people interact with your post, the more love it gets, and it gets shown to more people. But I've noticed with video, because I just try to do daily video clips of my podcast, it doesn't get like a ton of likes because you have to watch it, but
mhm.
you get way more impressions and attention, right? So when people do watch it, I'll get like 99 or 100 people watch it. They don't like engage with it, they don't like it. And then I thought about it. There's a lot of posts I don't there's a lot of posts of Trevor's I like, but I don't actually like it. I'm just like, oh, that's a good post, and I keep scrolling.
Right.
So there's a lot of people looking at your posts. I didn't notice this until I started doing video pretty consistently, because the text and image post metrics are not as like, they're not like showing like, hey, did someone linger on top of this, right, as
Right.
much. But like with video, you actually have hard metrics of how long they watch the video. And it's like, okay, I didn't get 100 likes, but 100 people watched this thing.
Yeah, it's not truly fair to compare video to text, like you said. Have you heard of Finn McKenty? He's a big YouTuber in like the rock and roll space, but he's now posting pretty consistently on
No.
LinkedIn. And he also
Yeah.
does his thing now is on LinkedIn is he's helping people that don't do video to get into video. He's like a coach to help people start doing video.
Okay.
But he has like 1 million followers on like between his other social medias like YouTube and others. He's awesome, but one thing he similar to you, he points out like he's always selling people on why they should do video instead of just text posts. He said that when he's walking down the street, he's had several instances where people will stop him because they feel like they know him. He's like, I've never heard of
Hmm.
them, but they feel like they know me because they've listened to me for hours. Like if you think about that with video, that's pretty insane. If somebody binges your podcast or YouTube channel, they listen to you and stare at your face for hours. A LinkedIn post or a tweet might have more likes and engagement, but some people just read the hook, like the first sentence, they look at the image, and they decide if they're going to hit the like button and keep scrolling. So
Yeah.
they might spend 5 seconds on it. Whereas video or audio content, people will spend hours over time, like sometimes all at once, sometimes stretched out
Spread
over a
out.
few months.
Yeah.
But that's just so impactful. So yeah, I've definitely been a bit more eager to get into the video content game at some point. It's just really hard to imagine doing that right now, but I see the benefits. So I think it's awesome that you do podcasting and you have a huge asset of this library of content. Even if it's a smaller number of listeners, the mileage is so much bigger because people spend so much time per episode consuming what you put out there. So I think it's awesome.
Well,
And
well, I think you should. Do you have an Opal camera? For those listening, like your video conferencing setup has upgraded last time I've talked with you. Like, is that an Opal camera? Like, because you're getting the focus.
it's called Nexigo. I got it on Amazon.
An Opal camera, like, and you should do what 37 Singles does, where, hey, Basecamp, Jason Fried. So he's mostly text posts, right? But then
Right.
he'll just do a little video where he demos, very low production. Him, it's like you're video conferencing with him, and he's just talking about a new feature they just launched. And I'm just like, that's what you should do, man. Talk about, like, hey, this is a thing I'm cooking up on Kleo. Maybe pull up the Figma prototype or something like that, because those SaaS founders that are so engaged in community and grassroots marketing are like, I mean, for me, I usually buy things from people that I like, and that applies to software too.
Yeah, no, you're so right. In fact, one of my very earliest inspirations for content creators was Andrew Gazdecki, and
I think, yeah,
he founded Micro Acquire, which is now just Acquire.
yeah,
They bought that domain name now, acquire.com. Before it was Micro Acquire, and he was always producing content that was about his software. And just the way he did it felt so relatable. Like I wasn't really even in the business of buying, or I wasn't on the market for buying or selling a business, which is what their software
yeah,
does. But the way he did it was so interesting to me. He was always sharing pieces of the software. Every week he'd share the wins, like how many businesses were sold through their platform, how much money was made by the customers using their software. It was in the millions of dollars. He's exactly what you just described, similar to Jason Fried. Building in public. I love that you say that. I really should not overthink it and produce some video content. I've even thought about just recording a Loom, talking about some new feature or design. I love Loom because I can see who actually watches it and how long they watch it.
yeah,
Test that out. So that's something I'm definitely interested in.
yeah. Another great build in public person is Brian, the CEO of Dovetail.
Okay.
And he's just talking about, like, hey, here's what my team's working on. Here's something Dovetail just released. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they do the other, like, traditional SaaS, because they're a pretty big company. They do like the traditional event marketing and stuff, but he's just talking about, new stuff that they've released, and like we'll post a video showing the new feature. I love Dovetail. And Allison Nolte, who I just interviewed, I just had on the show for Contra, like she's big on just like talking about the things that her team's doing to help freelancers find work, and then like showing like case study videos. There's the head of product at Intercom. I'm just giving a reading list for people who are interested in
Yeah.
this concept. The CPO of Intercom made a documentary series about how they shifted their whole roadmap to AI. Very highly produced thing. There's what they're adding and stuff. Final thing to add to the list
Yeah, keep it
is
going.
Rob Petroso from Rally, one of my favorite episodes. Surface something that you just mentioned, right? You only need 1,000 true fans to make
Mm-hmm.
a good living. You only need 1,000, like 100 raving fans to just be like really well off. Like just like they just buy anything. They don't even like rationalize. They just buy anything you put out, which I think MDS is getting to. But Robert Trozo, what he did is they on the side had day jobs. If you go into subreddits about any topic,
Okay.
you'll find your 1,000 true fans. These are people that care enough to go on an online forum and talk about something. And sneakerheads, like people talking about Jordans or collect like rare collectibles, baseball cards and stuff like that. And he basically, with his co-founders, invented an online collectible museum where you could buy a piece of like a really like rare Porsche 911 or a baseball card, like buy fractional shares of these
Oh wow,
collectibles. Dude,
that's
it's such a
clever.
cool company.
That's
Yeah.
really clever.
And then if a rich investor buys that collectible, it's like an IPO and you get an ROI because you bought a share of that baseball card.
Okay.
It's all about the story you tell. What makes something valuable is the story. Like how much of like the prices for Max is because of Steve Jobs' personal brand
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
story that like led to like how the dominance of Apple is like people don't even like think about if it's faster or a better piece of hardware. They're just like the story of Steve Jobs has inspired me so much that like I buy from this.
Especially early on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like those founder stories and being bold and talking in public and telling your
Mhm.
story, even if you haven't reached the milestone you know you can get to. That's one thing people say to me sometimes. They're like, I haven't done anything special, or junior designers are afraid to post online because they're like, I'm not, I haven't achieved anything. But like
Yeah.
the shit, people don't value storytelling enough. Storytelling isn't just for people that have made it. Like obviously those are exciting because people want to hear those cool stories. Like how did you achieve something so big? But storytelling can happen at any time. Like so, yeah. Like it's something that yeah. Like that Steve Jobs example is crazy because like who knows if he would have imagined Apple being as big as it is today. That's a good example.
Fan- Fantastic example. And to the junior point, I'll just speak directly to if there's a junior designer listening to this. If I listen to that voice in my head that I haven't accomplished anything, I'd argue I haven't really accomplished anything substantial in my career yet. Still,
Yeah.
here's the cure for imposter syndrome that I've learned. Like whenever I felt imposter syndrome, is like I'm just a journalist. You just see, you're like I'm not an authority, I'm not a thought leader. I'm just a curator of other expertise, right? That's what got me through the podcast for those years where I'm like, why am I still doing this? Is it's like I'm basically getting access to people that I wouldn't be able to access, like mentor. And then I could model how to be a good mentee. I'm not acting like an expert and like every guest I'm like, hey, teach me. And I'm doing that with you right now because I mean you're crushing on LinkedIn and I'm taking notes every time you post. As a junior, it's like, hey, just be the best student, and people want to take you under their wing. LinkedIn's how I got my first job.
Oh,
I met my boss back and forth, my first boss for about a year, and then when the time came where I'm looking for work, he's like, "Oh, just come over here." That's my answer to that question or that inhibition.
yeah, for sure. And I think like with Dive Club, his
Yeah,
podcast, I've heard him say that before too. That he's expressed the same sentiment that you did. Like podcasters are so lucky they get to have these deep chats with the most brilliant people. And he said the same thing. He doesn't pretend to be the expert. He's just helping take the knowledge from the experts and distribute it. And then you as a podcast host learn more than anyone because you hear very intimately 100% of the content and then you study it as you go over it and prepare to release your episodes, whereas the listeners might listen to maybe like 30%, sometimes they listen to
yeah.
like 80%. Where so like as a podcast host, I'm sure you have learned so much more than anyone from your guests. So I think
That's
it's
a nice
awesome.
way to put it because I'm just like, man, I need to hire an editor. I'm so burnt out every time I have to edit. So I mean, that's a nice that coaching advice you just gave there, because it's like, oh no, I get to review it because it's future Caden listening to past Caden ask dumb
All right.
questions or the occasional good question, and yeah, it's always fun to just watch the tape again. It's also made me a really good UX researcher as well because
Oh,
I'm a lot more comfortable interviewing and stuff like that. But yeah, it's like just do the thing, build in public. Back in Steve Jobs' time, or like when you want to get press and build a personal brand, you got to do it through traditional media.
yeah.
It's never
Yeah.
and there's tools like Kleo, which like take my money once you guys figure out the curated feeds, because that's to the point of connection, like connecting ideas and executing. Like there's plenty of LinkedIn softwares that have curated feeds and kind of
Mm-hmm.
streamline the process, like Growth Hack, the algorithm, but they're like $44 a month. It's a high price point. I could probably recreate. I mean, Justin Welsh teaches in his course how to make a curated feed, but I don't think those other companies have a good design co-founder
Yeah.
like
To
you
execute.
to execute the interaction design in such a way where you're like, oh, this like melds perfectly with my workflow. So
We're hoping that it's a very intuitive experience. We're just building up a beta list right now, so we're going to get people testing stuff out.
How do I get on it?
I'll get you on that list if you want.
It's like those like LinkedIn softwares. They're like, they cost more than like my social media software I use to post, but it doesn't replace the tool I'm using. It just increases my cost. Another feature request is the prompts, providing a writing prompt before you write the post, where someone see a question. Yeah, I saw this one. There's this one other podcaster. He was talking about software that did Twitter and LinkedIn. It didn't provide the same features as the other ones. It didn't streamline anything, but it provides little like writing prompts, and you just answer the prompt and gets you started. I think that'd be pretty interesting. But sorry, now this is the benefit of podcast. It's my show. I could just like hijack it and get what I want from founders whose software I like. But
no, I'm all ears. Sometimes people will message me and say, "Yeah, I'm a user of Kleo. I love it." And I always ask, please tell me if there's anything that you wish it had or anything you don't like about it. It's very rare that people actually get back to me and do give a feature request. So I actually really do appreciate it. And I wish more people would come to me with these feature requests. But yeah, the prompt one, that's interesting. We do have some ideas that tie into that, but aren't exactly like you answering a prompt, but I'm definitely going to take that to heart.
I'm looking at these LinkedIn creator emails and I'm just like, man, if they just productize this in the software where you go through like a template library to get you started.
Oh, we for sure have a template library. That is our feature.
Take my money.
Yep.
Please. Good sir, here's where's my checkbook? I actually wrote a physical check a couple weeks ago and I'm Googling how to do it correctly. Anyways, that's Trevor, I want to respect your time. Is there anything that you feel like hasn't been said that should be said? And how can people find your work?
I feel like we covered a lot of good stuff. One thing, we did say this, but I'll repeat it to make sure that it is a takeaway for anyone listening. You really don't need to strive for virality in content creation or in a startup. You don't have to have everyone in the world's eyes to benefit from it. And if that's one takeaway from this, if we're talking about personal branding and the benefits of putting your name out there, startups don't need the whole pie to be successful. They just need a sliver of the market, a sliver of the pie, and they can be extremely successful and wildly happy with the results and outcomes that they have. Content creation is the same. You don't need every follower on LinkedIn to follow you. In fact, you probably wouldn't want that because they're not all interested in what you have to say. There's benefit to really owning your tiny corner of the internet and just leaning into that. It doesn't have to be a high quantity as long as the quality is the right people interested in what you have to say. For anyone listening, you definitely have something worth sharing, but if you've worked as a professional to any capacity, there's other people that would love to learn from you. So I would hope people take away from this. Your other question was how to find me. I do post on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads a little bit, but like just not much. Like I haven't dedicated even a fraction of the effort there as I have on LinkedIn. So I primarily post on LinkedIn and interact with people in the comments there. I'd love if anyone wants to try out Kleo and give any recommendations for feedback or feature requests. Definitely all ears. We are very we pivot when we hear enough people talking about certain things.
You prioritize when you hear enough, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, maybe it's my personal challenge to make you guys pivot, just give you enough intelligence to be like, whoa, our model's off. But I think you guys are onto something. I really admire it. Can you spell Kleo, by the way, to anyone listening that's never heard of it?
Kleo, and it's
Kleo.so. It's a Chrome extension right now.
Right now, we're building a web app, so people will be able to use it separately from LinkedIn. That will be able to be used on top of LinkedIn. It'll just beef up the Chrome extension. The way it works now is you open up LinkedIn and there's Kleo on the side, like an assistant.
Cool. So you actually have a comprehensive strategy to work both angles based off context. That's creativity right there.
It's going to be fun. I'm excited for it.
Hey, thanks for coming on the show. You have a good one. And talk soon, Trevor.
Thanks, man. We'll talk soon.
Hey, listener. Thanks again for listening to The Way of Product. As we power down today's session on the fusion of creativity and technology, let's solidify the energy you've gotten from our dialogue today. If you've gleaned insights or strategies that could turbocharge your projects, I have a small but powerful ask. Swing by the platform where you're hearing this and leave a review. Think of it as your digital high five to us. It's a fuel that propels this content to more creative technologists like you, amplifying the impact of the shared knowledge. So until our next interview, keep pioneering and pushing the envelope. Thanks again for lending your ears and your imagination to our community. Catch you on the next download.